Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That is Philippians 4:13. I'm your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where you will find encouragement, resources, and community, as well as be equipped for your parenting journey. As a mom of 8, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adults, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were little, I understand what it's like raising children with trauma and prenatal substance exposure and other challenges unique to this parenting journey. So we are here for you. Stay tuned for the schedule of my upcoming online workshops. I'm taking July off as my daughter is getting married and another daughter is coming in from out of town. So lots of busy things going on in early July. And then we also have our first ever retreat for our support group, our Hope for the FASD Journey online support community. We've got several moms coming in from all over the country towards the end of July for a retreat together. So lots of things going on. I will return to online offering online training and workshops, as well as the parent coaching in August. So stay tuned for my upcoming schedule for that. But you can grab my newest book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, which is now available on Amazon. And I hope that you will check that out. It's a great time to start it. You don't have to start it. It's not one of those devotions where you have to start it January 1st. You can jump in anytime, and I hope you will check it out. You can grab it on Amazon. Also, would love to connect with you in person. I am booking my schedule for 2026. In September, I will be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans annual event. This year, we will be in Atlanta, September 23rd through 25th. I will be leading a coaching room on the topic of raising children and teens and into young adulthood with FASD. So you can come to the coaching room and we'll have those conversations, as well as a meetup, which is parents and caregivers of kiddos with FASD. We'll have a designated room at a designated time where we can meet up, connect with each other, share, and I will pray for you. So if you go to CAFO, please find me. I also have a table in the exhibit hall. And in October, I will be at the Replanted Retreat Conference in Chicago, and that is October 15th through 17th, and I will be leading 3 breakout sessions there and have an exhibitor booth. So if you come to Replanted, I highly recommend both of these conferences, CAFO and Replanted, vital for our parenting journey. I have attended CAFO. Oh my goodness, I think this is probably my 15th year of attending CAFO, and I would not miss it. So I hope that you'll get out to one of these events this year. And if you are planning an event, maybe you're interested in having me come and lead a retreat for your foster and adoptive moms, or you want a special training where you bring me in for a one-day presentation on FASD and some training, or you schedule something online for your support group, whatever you have, whatever you might be interested in, I would love to partner with you on that. So please contact me. You can email me directly, Sandra Flach at justicefororphansny.org, link in the show notes, and I'll be thrilled to see an email from you, and I will personally respond. So now, today, we will be tackling a very important topic with our special guest, Michael Gaither. Michael is a Black adoptee raised by a white family in Lincoln, Nebraska. He spent 49 years living the transracial adoption experience before reuniting with his biological family and finally understanding what it meant to see himself in someone else. With 30 years in education as a teacher, principal, district administrator, and executive leadership coach, Michael founded Beyond the Moment Adoption Studio, a digital resource for white parents raising Black children. His first book, I Was Your Black Child: What White Parents Raising Black Children Need to Hear Before It's Too Late, is currently in progress. Please welcome Michael Gaither. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the podcast and hear your story and for you to help us learn from your experience. Our listeners are primarily foster and adoptive parents, and you've got information and a lived experience that we need to learn from. So I understand you were adopted at 18 months old. What do you know, and what can you tell us about that early part of your story?
Yeah, the early part of the story. So I was adopted out of Syracuse, New York. And so that's where I was living at the time of my birth. I was adopted by a white family out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And so coming from Syracuse, New York into Lincoln, Nebraska, at this time, it's 1973. And so Lincoln, Nebraska was primarily white, a lot of white spaces there. So I grew up, in white schools and white churches in white neighborhoods and the whole thing. So, but the early years, obviously I was 18 months, so I don't remember much about that. But what I do know now as an adult tells me a lot about what I was going through in those early years. And I think that's the difference. I didn't have the words, the vocabulary. I didn't have a way to really describe what I was going through to my parents or to teachers or whoever it may be. So I sat with a lot of things for a long time. And so just now I'm 54 years old, but I feel like getting back into this work with transracial adoption and talking with adoptees and talking with birth parents and talking with, just a range of people. I'm excited about being in this space. And then hopefully people can learn from my story. But the angle that I've taken in jumping back into the business has been with I'm really offering resources on the parent side, right? So I'm more about helping white parents that are adopting Black kids because that's my passion, because that was my story.
Yeah, and I love that because our listeners are primarily foster and adoptive parents, and many of them are probably white parents raising Black children. And so your experience in your life is really something that we can learn from. You as an adult now at 54, being able to talk to those things. And I think that I'm guessing that from the 70s to now, there has been more of an understanding. Like I know, even back then, like when I first became an adoptive parent and a kinship caregiver was in the late 90s. And initially we didn't know a whole lot about, for example, trauma. And now there is much more, resources and education out there so that parents coming into this space can understand that. And I would hope that it's even getting better, especially with the transracial adoptions and how parents are being equipped. But at what point, how old were you as a kid when you started realizing, you were different, and, what was that like for you? Tell us what it was like as a kid growing up.
Yeah, I think I remember it as far back as preschool, because in preschool, I can remember, I think I went to this preschool, it was called Mary Moffitt's. I don't know why I remember that name, but I do. Mary Moffitt's, and it was a preschool. And I can remember being in there knowing I was different because I'm Black, and small kids will do things, right? You remember them, why are you touching my hair? Right, things of that nature. And so, and I just remember that, like this place bothers me, and so I knew I'm the only Black child there. I'm looking around, I'm looking at other kids. And of course, as a kid, you'll talk to anybody. But if kids start being disrespectful, kids start teasing you, things like that, you tend to withdraw. And so at the same time I was going to that preschool, I know the house that I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I started knowing that something was going on. I always wanted food. And I always wanted to eat. And I can remember taking naps and sneaking out into the kitchen at my parents' house and grabbing whatever I could and taking it back to my room to just eat. And so, that stays with me because now I know that the food was really the only thing that was providing me comfort. And that was in my preschool years. That was in my elementary school years. I used to get in trouble when we moved to the house where I went to elementary school at. My older brother, who was adopted, but he's white, he was 3 years older than me. So there was a time there where we went to the same elementary school. And I can remember he was always coming home telling on me because I was eating more than one lunch. If kids didn't want their meal, instead of me going outside to recess, I'd stay in the lunchroom and just keep eating, right? I have memories of all these things. And so then in the middle of the night, I'd sneak down. I had bunk beds in my house, for example, and my brother was on the bottom bunk and I was on the top. And I would sneak down the ladder of the bunk bed, sneak back to the kitchen, grab something like a whole loaf of bread. And I'm up in the middle of the night just eating piece after piece after piece. But that was my comfort. And it's strange to be thinking I was eating plain bread, but I was eating the whole loaf. And but of course I didn't know what was going on then. I know what's going on now because I always had the anxiety of having to go back to that school with those white kids. I was going to stand out, be different. There were times when I didn't want anyone to see me getting dropped off by the white people, right? Because people were going to ask questions. And I never wanted to have to explain my story. And the reason I didn't want to explain my story at that age is because I didn't really know. I didn't have answers to the story. All I knew in my life was that my life started with white people. I didn't ask for it. I didn't raise my hand and say, hey, please, I want to be in this situation. But that's what I knew. And that's not, I have great adoptive parents. My adoptive mom has since passed. My adoptive dad is still alive and well. I have a younger sister that's 6 years younger than me. She's the biological child. And then there's me. And then I have an older brother. But those experiences in school just stand out to me that I was so uncomfortable in elementary. And I was you think about me being 5 or 6 years old, I'm already on the run because I'm thinking, drop me off here because I want to explain to the kids, I'm black and white, you guys are white. I remember that like it was yesterday. I only lived that, and it was funny. I didn't live that far from the school. So I really don't even know why I was getting dropped off. But every now and again, I get dropped off. But I didn't want them to know. When I was in first grade, my mom said, well, they're having Grandparents' Day. And so your grandmother can come up to the school. I remember going back and saying, I don't want her to come. It's fine. She doesn't need to come. Why? Because I knew this is going to spark questions. I don't want to be answering questions about the makeup of my family when I go to school. And so I remember that. Now, my grandmother ended up coming anyway. And so I still got questions and had to explain. I just remember being very uncomfortable with it all. So that's never going to happen again. So I was always ducking things like that. And so, and then growing up, because of this discomfort, what started to come out from me and different adoptees, we handle it differently. We're not all the same. But for me, because I was uncomfortable, I didn't particularly like the teasing. I didn't want to have to explain. And I just felt this anger was building up in me at a young age. And so I was throwing temper tantrums in kindergarten. I've worn glasses my whole life. So I had glasses even in kindergarten. I don't know how many glasses I broke and went through because every time I would get mad, it would be the glasses that would come off and I'd throw them against the wall. And this is in first grade and second grade and kindergarten. And so as I had this anger and I was throwing all these temper tantrums, of course, people were addressing the behavior, right? I was getting consequences for my behavior, but no one was really addressing what was causing the behavior, right? And so that became the problem. And then this turned into from going to anger to me running away. So I was running away in first grade, in second grade, and this is a true story. I was sleeping in the schoolyard in the bushes I'd go 3-4 nights, right, and be away from my house. I was never far from my house. I was either in the schoolyard sleeping in the bushes, or I was in my next door neighbor's yard in her shrubs. I'd sleep there. And then when my parents would get up, still going to work, doing whatever they were doing, I knew people had to be looking for me, but they seemed to keep a regular schedule. They were still going to work. And I would sneak back home, get some more food, and then be gone again. And then when I was running away, I'd find an apartment building and I'd sleep in the back stairwell of the apartment building. And this is all as a young child. So it all stemmed from me just being uncomfortable everywhere I went. Everywhere I went, there was a stare. Someone's looking at me. And even if they weren't, that's how you perceive it. Because when you go out to eat, I'm Black, and I go out to eat with my entire family who's white, and you're standing there in the line and you're waiting to be seated, I was very aware of, what are you guys looking at? You know what I mean? Yes, I'm Black, they're white, right? I can't do anything about it, but it just seemed like everybody was focused on our family makeup. And so that made me not want to go anywhere. I just wanted to stay at home. Sometimes you may tell your kids, hey, I'm going to go run some errands. You want to come? And sometimes the kids do. I was always that one, no, I don't want to come, because out there, outside the comfort of my home or my room, that's the danger zone, right? So I didn't want to go out there, but I think I was the only one thinking it was a danger zone. So you feel isolated and by yourself with your own thoughts and feelings, and you just think nobody understands what this is like.
And you were too young to explain that to your adoptive parents or anybody else. And I'm assuming you're in really a predominantly white community, white school, white church.
Oh, yes.
So the stares, right? Because it's unusual to see a Black child, especially with a white family. And so tell me a little bit about how that affected your identity. Because I know with adoption, identity is huge for people who were adopted. And then now you've got that extra level of different skin color. So you're really, and being with a white family. So what was that like for you? How did that impact your identity?
Well, how it impacted my identity, listen, I was never comfortable in my own skin from as way back as I can remember, because being in Lincoln, Nebraska, and being in a community that was all white, when I go into these spaces, I don't fit with the white kids, because I'm too dark for the white kids, right? For them to, welcome me in and accept me and know what my life is all about. I'm too dark for them. But you go over with the Black kids, the few Black kids that there were, I didn't really get around many Black kids until high school. But before that, there would be a few, here and there sprinkled into the school. But I didn't really communicate with them or socialize with them, because they know, but you got white parents, right? And so you're not us. We don't understand what's going on in your family. So, and I've never communicated with Black people. So I don't really know your language. I don't really know terminology that you're using. Some of the things that you talk about in terms of traditions and what you do in your household around the holidays and different foods that you're talking about, I don't know anything about that. So I don't fit there, and I don't fit with all the sea of white either, and so how it affected me is okay, so what do I do? And I'll tell you what ended up happening. I then started thinking, well, how am I going to socialize with anybody? I don't have any friends. I don't feel comfortable in this space. So I'm trying to figure out, how can I get friends? So then that turned into me doing things like stealing. I would steal some little money from my dad, go into his wallet, take a little $5 bill, he won't be missing that, and go to the store before school, buy candy, gum, all that, load up my backpack, and then go to school, and I'm giving out candy and gum. Well, I got attention that way. What now, all they wanted was the candy and the gum. They still don't want to be friends, but it felt like, to me, maybe I can buy my way into this. And so, and the reason why I'm telling you this story is, like, when you ask about the identity, you're searching for it. You're trying to figure out where you belong. But I feel like I have two choices. Either you're going to be with the white kids or you're going to be with the Black kids. And I'm looking to figure out where I fit, and I don't fit anywhere. So now I got to try other strategies. I'm going to try to buy some friendships around here. And that lasted for years. Okay. Me just trying to figure out how can I get people to understand who I am. And I wasn't I'm not the flashiest dressed kid, at the time. My parents were very frugal. So not only am I Black, raised in a white family, but I dress different than a lot of those, kids. So they were making fun of me about that. White kids making fun of me about, your Black features and all this stuff. And it just saying that this is like, I'm living a nightmare day in and day out. And the thing that I often tell people when they ask me about my experience is that every day it was about survival. Now, my parents would come home and we'd sit at the dinner table and they would say something along the lines of, tell us 3 things that you learned at school today, because they thought everyone needs to report out. And this is how we engage with you to find out what was going on while we were at work and you were at school. Well, I can remember thinking with that question, it's the wrong question. I wasn't learning anything because for me, all I was trying to do was survive. So every time we're going anywhere, we're traveling through the hallways, I got to pay attention to who's coming around corners, this and that, because I don't want to be teased. I don't want you to say anything to me, right? This feels terrible. And so you're asking me what I learned, and I'm saying this is what I learned was how to survive. And so I refer to it as when I would come home, my home was still my safe place, even though it's filled with white people too. But when I got home, I can go to my room. I can shut the door. I can hang out here and I can breathe again because I made it back to my home base. And that's how I describe the story. It's surviving school, surviving those 7-8 hours, whatever it was, making it back home. And then when I come back home, I don't want a lot of questions right now. Even as a young kid, stop asking me questions because I'm just happy to be back home in my space, but I don't want to relive what I just went through. And that's what the questions became. You're now asking me to relive something that that was the hardest day I feel like I've been through. And now through your questioning, you're asking me to relive it. And then I'm going back and having to, dig down again to find the right words for what I'm going through. And I know I didn't have them.
Yeah. And I'm sure that your parents were just thinking, they weren't thinking along those lines. They were thinking, what did you learn in school today? Academically, was there, did your parents, did your adopted parents ever understand? Did they get it at all at any point during your childhood?
So the thing about it, Sandra, we didn't talk about it, right? It's one of those families we didn't talk about it. When people ask me, what would you have liked to happen differently? I would have liked to open the door to those conversations about race. I would have liked to know that you see the firestorm that I'm going into every day.
Right.
And I want, even if I'm not ready to answer the questions when I first come home, there will be a time, an appropriate time, that maybe you can just, work a couple questions in there that allow me to tell you how hard this is. But I first need to know that you see color. I don't like when people say they don't see color, right? That bothers me. What do you mean you don't see color? When you see me walking down the street, there's a Black man. I know when I see you walking down the street, there's a white lady, right? I know this. So pretending that I don't see, I don't get that. I know what people I think mean. You know what I mean? I'm not, people are people, love is love, that sort of thing. Well, I want you to know and appreciate my differences, my culture, my roots. We didn't talk about that though. Right. So now when I'm looking, and again, you have to look at the whole picture, right? Because when I'm going to school, those kids don't understand me. They got questions about my situation. I don't even feel comfortable with having them come to my house because there would be an explanation again. What is all this going on? So I try to keep all these kids away from me. And so, and so now I'm at home. If we're not addressing any of this, I don't get a chance to actually tell you what's happening in my own words, even though I would have been struggling to find the words that I have today. but still you needed to know, I don't feel comfortable going here. When you're going to work, I'm miserable. And now I'm just trying to come home and I got to do it all over again tomorrow. And that's a tough thing to do when you're young.
Yeah. Now, and I can only imagine by high school, it gets harder. So was there a point where it all came to a head? Like, tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So by the time well, I'm going to back up just a second because when I was in junior high, I was in, elementary school back then was kindergarten through sixth grade. And then junior high was 7, 8, 9. And then high school, I only went 3 years of high school, 10, 11, 12. So when I was in seventh grade, it came to, I had some issues that landed me in a mental health facility. And I can remember my adoptive mom one day, I think it was in the summertime, but she asked me about something about why my chores weren't done. I was coming home from riding my bike all around the city or something, and I just lost it. I had a temper tantrum. She was asking me these questions, and I ended up not destroyed, but I made a mess of the entire house, breaking things, flipping over furniture, breaking all the dishes. It looked like a tornado came through that house. Probably lasted about 15, 20 minutes. Okay. And my mom ran outside, and I can remember, pushing her in the bushes. I can remember my neighbors calling out, telling me to leave my mom alone. I think I'm like 12 at this time. I'm running down the street. The police picked me up, took me to the hospital. And then I remember them telling me to bend over. They put a shot in my behind. The next thing I know, I wake up and I'm in Omaha, Nebraska now. That's about 45 minutes to an hour away from Lincoln. I'm in Omaha, and there's a nurse standing over me, and she tells me where I'm at. And I realize I'm in this mental health facility with other youth, kids. Everybody was, under the age of 18, but I'm locked up in here now. And so now I'm really mad. Now you dropped me off here. I knew I had a temper, but in my mind, I had a temper before. So why is this time one that I have to land up here? So I was in there for a couple of months. You're going to school in there. You're going through counseling, things like that. And I can remember not wanting my parents to come pick me up. There came a time where they came to get me, but I had to participate in the counseling sessions in order for them to be able to take me home. I wouldn't say anything. I didn't participate. And I can remember my adopted father saying, well, this is just too bad, Michael. We came here to take you home, and we thought today we'd get back to life. And I'm thinking, I don't want to go back to that life. At that moment he said that, I was thinking, go back to what? It's not like I'm not winning in my mind. Then I wasn't winning any prize for going back to that situation. That's more discomfort. That's more teasing. That's more bullying. That's all that. So at least here, I'm locked in here. But by that time, I'd already associated with the other kids that were in the facility. And you're kind of thinking, well, we all got some issues or whatever, but this becomes home now. And that's what I felt like. So that was that. Then when I ended up getting out of there. There was a time period when I went to junior high in seventh grade. This was after the facility. I met my first Black teacher. That is the reason why I'm sitting here talking to you today. If I don't meet him, I don't go along. I don't go on to have the career that I had. I don't make the decisions that I made career-wise in my life. But when I met my first Black male teacher in seventh grade, he was the PE teacher, and he was also the basketball coach. And I played basketball, and I just looked up to him, and I said, he understands me. He knew my situation. He knew about the temper tantrums. He knew all of that. But he took me under his wing, mentored me, came to pick me up, all these things from my house. He'd take me for rides, and I just thought he was so cool. But I played on this basketball team, and I threw a temper one day. I had I guess I was going off on one of my teammates in the locker room, and he kicked me off the basketball team. Mm-hmm. Now I looked up to him, but he told me later that was the hardest thing he ever had to do. But he knew he needed to send that message. It would pay off later. And it hurt me because basketball became my comfort zone. So now he kicked me off the basketball team. So that was still in junior high. you're right about going to high school. In high school, I went to the most diverse high school in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's probably 2,200 kids at the time. So it was the largest high school and then the most diverse. Now there's more Black kids. Okay. But I'm still this kind of nerdy, I'm Black, but I certainly didn't talk like they're talking. I certainly don't have that level of comfort. I don't have the vocabulary they're using. So I was really ducking them, trying to stay away from them, although my best friend at the time was Black. So I had him. But I just really wasn't comfortable when the group got too big. So I was still, ducking people all the time in high school. And then in high school, I didn't have as many temper tantrums in high school, in class. That wasn't the thing, but I still really wasn't interested in learning. In high school, I became the class clown because I'm still looking for friends. So I'm now making everyone laugh in the back of the classroom, and all that was going well. I became more social because I did start knowing people. I knew people, and then there were people I would call friends, and I'd see them in the hallway. So it was hard to get me back into class. So I just kind of saw high school as social out. I'm just going to socialize, but I'm still navigating my way throughout the building because there's danger zones here of people I can't talk to because I know they're going to start things up with me. But also in high school, I had basketball and track to hide behind too, because that was really my focus. And I enjoyed sports. And so I was that guy. I was the athlete. So that made me feel good on a level that people are recognizing me for my talent. But once the game is over, or once the season is over, you still have to navigate the white space at the school, and you still have to have friends. You still have to have things to do. So and to your point, after high school, in high school, you may have 7 periods, right? So I may have to pass in those hallways 7 different times. This used to go through my mind. Which direction are you going that's the safest? So again, going back to my parents talking about what you learned today, I'm mapping out which way I can go, which door I can come in, which door I can leave out. So you imagine all this on what I'm doing every single day, just trying to survive, right? And that's what it was. And so when I graduated from high school and I went to college, that's why I tell people that's when I became Michael Gaither. And that's when I started taking school seriously. Because when you get to college, now everyone's not traveling to these classes in the same way. I may have, a few classes a week, that you're going to long breaks in between. I might have a class one day at 9 o'clock and one at 2 o'clock that day. But I don't have to, I just got to go to those 2 places. And in college, everyone's there for a reason. You're still here getting your education. People seem to be more locked in and focused. So the environment was so different. If I wanted just to get away from people, you go back to your dorm room and you just get away, and I wait till my next class. So, but that gave me opportunity to research more about Black culture. I think that it was because one, that just the pace of my life changed. There's not as much ducking. The more that I learned, the more comfortable that I got. And I started thinking to myself, yeah, I'm Black. This is what I do. I'm Black and I'm proud of it, right? It doesn't take away, I don't unlove my parents because they're white. It's just that I'm Black, I'm proud of it. And this is the time when I started also really knowing that I wanted to find my birth parents. And I just thought, because now I'm comfortable with who I am, there's one other thing I also want to get comfortable with, and that's knowing my roots. Who were those people in Syracuse, New York? So that's kind of, leading you up, through the story, some of the important points along the way. But college was where I then decided to take it seriously. And I never really took school seriously before then, even though I always knew I can do this, right? It wasn't a priority because I couldn't see the reason for it. And so the one person I told you about was my PE teacher. As I started getting into college, he was talking to me about, teaching. And I asked him some questions that I had because I knew he was a teacher. And I just said, I'm supposed to be doing this for kids. And so I'm going to go into elementary education and I'm going to be a teacher. And so I went on that track, and that's the way that it worked out. And I taught for about 4 years or so. And then after that, I went into school administration and went on to, be a principal. And the only reason I say that is because that's what the PE teacher went on to do as well. He wasn't a PE teacher forever. He went on to be an award-winning principal and was a great man. And when I became a principal, he had me come to his school. He was still mentoring me, making sure I got off to the right start. So I owe one person that stands out to me that if I never meet Timothy Carroll, if I never meet him, I'm not here. I don't know where I would be, because I know the circumstances around the time when I met him. And if he's not there, it's scary to think where I would be. So one person can really make a huge difference, in terms of a child. And the one thing I want to say while it's on my mind, we often say love, is not enough. As adoptees, and the adoptees that I talk to, you'll hear that a lot. It's like, but love isn't enough. My parents loved me. I had a roof over my head, food on the table. They were making sure I was involved in different activities and events. It just so happened that the activities and events they had me involved in were more white people, right? So, but it's not for them lack of trying, but I never saw Black people in my home. I never saw Black people in my neighborhood. When I went to get my hair cut, I was going to Sally's Beauty Salon. Okay? All right. Sally's Beauty Salon. Doesn't look like I should be going to a Sally's Beauty Salon, right? But those experiences, there's trauma that comes with that. Because when I sat down in that chair at Sally's Beauty Salon, I still remember to this day, every time I went in there, I had like matty, my hair was matted. It's very thick. We call it nappy, right? Tightly, tight curls. And so we weren't putting, grease in my hair. You need, certain products, to put in your hair to, make sure everything's good. And that wasn't happening. Mine was just as dry as can be. I'm trying to pour water on my head to see if that'll help get the pick through it. So when I would go to Sally's hair salon, they have to work with it. And I'm saying, you're hurting me, right? Yeah. So I'm having this experience. You're taking me to this place with these white people and they're hurting my head and I don't want to go. Just leave me alone. I don't want to get my hair cut. And it's all about because the environment you're putting me in was causing me pain.
Wrong environment. Yeah.
And they didn't know it. See, right. they didn't know it. And so sometimes, what I try to stress when I'm telling my story, I want to make it clear. This doesn't have anything to do with me not loving my adoptive parents and them not loving me. And I've never said any of this broadly anywhere until now at 54, where I just said, you know what, I'm going to tell my story. And I don't care, who hears it. It's not to offend anybody, but I want to help people along the way. And so many times, Sandra, and you know this, but as adoptees, we oftentimes don't say certain things to our parents because we're trying to protect their feelings. And I spent a lot of time as a kid because I knew my parents didn't know. You don't know Black culture. You don't know what these Black kids are talking about. You don't know that, like, why this is so painful for me to go to that school. You don't know that. But every now and again, I might bring something to my parents to let them know this happened, and when the response would come back, well, maybe, those are kids and sometimes you just have to ignore them. Well, ignoring them today doesn't mean they're not going to be here again tomorrow, right? So I can't ignore everything. So then that brings, hardship, to you again. But I don't want them to be hurt. Because I do know I have a house, I got parents, I'm loved, but I don't stay here all day with them either. I got to go out into the scary world. So those were the things that I knew. I don't want to bring this up to them because I don't want to hurt them. And what this was making me do, particularly in high school, I can remember saying things to my parents like, you're not my real parents anyway. right? Because you're making me mad and now you're not my real parents. And I knew that was hurtful, but I didn't really have the care back then if I was hurting them in that way either, because I felt like you're hurting me, but you're not understanding. And I can't really tell you what's going on, because even though I think you're putting me in situations that hurt, I still do not want to hurt you in that way. The temper tantrums and all the behavior things that come out of it, I just couldn't control it. I just couldn't control it and say one thing, and I'm flying off the handle.
Yeah. Also, because we're going to get a little bit more into what white parents need to know, and you're going to talk to a lot about that shortly. But one thing that crossed my mind when you were talking about college, you could finally settle down and learn and get serious. All of those years in school prior to that, you were in survival mode, but now at college, you're not really in survival mode so much anymore. So your brain could learn. You could focus
Yeah,
on those things, and
absolutely.
that made a huge difference. So before we move on to getting into what you're doing today and what you can teach us,
Hmm.
um, you reunited with your birth family at
Hmm.
49 years old, I believe. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah. So my birth family, um, at 49. So this started when I was a principal at the time. I was about 34 years old. And we had, through going back to I think it was Lutheran Family Services in Nebraska, we had received some information about my adoption. Because I was adopted out of New York, adoptions were closed. So I
Mhm.
didn't have access to my original birth certificate, anything like that, really any information about the adoption. So I went on the other side to Nebraska to see what we could find. And we just got some basic information about it was redacted. So I couldn't really see who my mom was, any names, but I could see that my mom was 23 years old. I could see, what her features were, what my dad's features were. It was basically letting my adoptive parents know the baby that they were getting. And, so it described me at that time. So I had that. But then somewhere in those conversations with Lutheran Family Services, somehow, I don't know, somebody slipped up and we got a little look into, I think that last name there says, and so we were able to figure out my birth mother's name
Mm.
somewhere in that process. And then when I did, we did the research, and then I felt like, I think this is her phone number. She's alive, and I think, this is her number right there in Syracuse. So I had that phone number. I carried that phone number around for about 2 years. I carried that phone number around because I knew at the time, I'm old enough now to know, I don't know if I'm in the right mindset right now with all that I'm doing, because I knew that if you reunite, not even reunite. If you make contact, there's the
Yeah,
possibility for the rejection.
right.
And one of the things that I know, most adoptees will tell you the same thing. When you feel rejected, it's
Mm.
problematic. It's like a trigger, right?
Right.
And so I, you know, for me, I just didn't want that.
That rejection, you probably didn't want to experience that rejection.
Yeah. Because rejection, I mean, it hurts,
Yeah.
right? And so I would do whatever I could to not feel the rejection. And so, those are things that I think adoptees, that we all agree on, that you'll do whatever you can to avoid the rejection.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2 years you carried her number around.
So for 2 years, I carried a number around. One day I came home from work. And as I said, I was a principal at the time. And something told me, tonight's the night. I got the
Mm.
courage. I'm doing it. I need the answer today. And so what I did was I called her number, and she answered the phone. She said hello. I said hello. And I asked her if my birth date meant anything to her,
Mm.
and so there was a slight pause, and she was like, well, who is this? And I said, and I remember saying, Mom, I said, I'm your son. And
Mm.
I know I was adopted 1972. And there was another pause. And she said, how did you get this number? This is you, right? So that was my thought at the time. I got you. You know what I mean? Because I didn't believe that would be the question that you would ask, right? Unless it was you, right? So that how you get your number would make it important. I felt like I'm just going to get a denial. You know, this isn't me. You got the wrong person. You know, and I would have probably left there with that and going, I guess maybe it's not. You know, but once she said that, I knew I'm talking to you. And then she said, there was another brief pause with silence, and she said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And she hung up the phone. So then I'm like, well, I talked to her, but she said she can't do it anymore, hung up the phone. I waited a few minutes. I called back. A man answered the phone this time. I left my cell phone number. I said, if anybody, not if anybody, but if my mother changes her mind, right, just know this number will always be here. She can reach out at any time if she changes her mind. And I left it at that. That was when I was 34. 15 years, another 15 years went by. I never got the phone call. She never reached back out. Now I'm 49. I'm having another moment where I say, I don't know, she probably getting close to her 70s. I need to, life isn't forever. I'm going to go at this one more time. This time I had the name, still had the phone number. Of course, I knew what her name was, but I found the Facebook group that was called DNA Angels, and they help you find whoever you may be looking for. You can tell them a little bit about your story. So I told them my story, my mother's name. I was adopted out of Syracuse at this time. About an hour later, they sent me a message back saying, hey, I think we found your brother, your biological brother. This was on Facebook. So they sent me a screenshot, sent me his name, and they said, you should reach out to him. So I reached out to this guy. He's about 3 years older than me. I reached out to him. And the very first thing he said on his response a couple of days later was, yeah, Michael, I'm your brother. That's exactly the first line. Yeah, Michael, I'm your brother. And he said, I didn't know about you until about 9 years ago, right? So at that point, I knew, okay, I'm here now because he knows about me. So I know your family. So this is getting big now for me. I'm thinking, I got him. I know the mom. I know I got a brother. And I knew that I had another brother that lived in Virginia, which is the oldest. So now I know who he is. But at the same time, I was also doing ancestry DNA. So when my ancestry DNA results came back, one of my brothers was on there as a close match. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but then also my maternal grandmother was on there. I had some first cousins on there. So now I'm sending them messages through Ancestry DNA. Cousins are responding back. I had some great aunts that responded back. Now I'm coming off of this vacation and they're saying, call us when you get back home. So my first call was to my grandmother. She's still alive today. I think she's 95, 6. So I talked to her. That was the very first one I talked to. And when I talked to her, she just said, we always wondered about you. You know what I mean? Where you were at. We didn't even know you were going to be adopted. The thing was, my mom, she just adopted me. They thought I was coming home. My mom had other plans. Okay. So I was adopted. So my grandmother said, if I would have known she was going to adopt you, I would have raised you myself. Okay. So we had a nice conversation, told her about a lot about my life, how I grew up, learned a lot from her. And she says to me, well, we're having a family reunion in July. This was like 6 weeks it was going to be 6 weeks from the time I was talking to her. And she said, you should come. And I said, I'll be there because I wasn't going to wait for anyone to have to, uninvite me. So I said, oh, I'll be there. I'll be there. So got a plane ticket and we ended up being there. But between the time that I went to the reunion, I talked to my brothers. I did just more research on, talking to my cousins, talking to great aunts, things like that. And then my brother that lives in Virginia, when I talked to him, he told me, he said, Michael, he said, I don't know if mom is ever going to be ready. I don't think she's ready right now. I can't promise you that she'll ever talk to you. She's very private, kind of keeps to herself. And I said, listen, I get that. I'm not trying to force myself on anybody. If she's ready, I'm happy to have the conversation. If not, I'm just going to talk to whoever in the family who wants to know more about me. And I'd love to learn more about you all. And so that's the way it went. So I don't know, a couple of weeks passed by, and I'm sitting out back at my house one day, and I'm going over some ancestry DNA stuff, trying to figure out the family tree, and my phone rings. And I look down at my phone, and it said, you know how sometimes someone calls you and your number is not locked in the phone, but it says maybe this person. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. It's maybe in my mom's name. This is her. This has got to be this is my birth mom. So I'm running in the house to get in a more quieter space, and I answer the phone, and she says, Michael, this is your birth mom. And I was because if you've never been through that, and for the, and I knew I had talked to her, like I said, 15 years ago, briefly. But that point where she calls and that you reached out to me after all this time, I know why, because you got wind of, he's going to be coming to the reunion and people were talking to me, and now, you wanted to be included. But that didn't matter to me. She got to that point where she felt safe enough that she could have this conversation. She got the courage, just like I had gotten the courage early in my life to just reach out to her. And now we're here. We ended up having conversation after conversation, probably 60 to 70 hours of phone time between the time she called me and the reunion. But by the time I met her at her apartment when I went to Syracuse for the first time, I felt like I had known her pretty good. I just haven't laid eyes on you. So when I called and said, hey, outside your apartment, and she lives in one of those places where they have to let you in. So she came down the hallway to let me in. And I will never forget that moment. She opened that door. And for the first time in my life, to be looking in a mirror and knowing that I am now having the opportunity that I dreamed about, that I used to look at other kids and say, you don't know how lucky you are. You come downstairs in the morning, you sit at the breakfast table with your parents, and guess what? You know where you came from. You know who you look like. Yeah. And for the first time, I got that experience at 49, and my mom is like, it's almost, I feel like when I look at her, I see myself, every single time I see myself. It's like we're twins. I see that. I see it. And I've never had that feeling before. Never have I had that feeling. So I gave her a big old hug, went in, and I got to, I had a audio. I like to write. So I had an audio poem for her, just kind of giving a story of my life and just kind of now how I'm sitting here with her today. And it was put to some background music. And so I played that for her because I knew I probably will be emotional, won't be able to get out my words the same way. So I was prepared. I came prepared, and I just pushed play. And she was listening to it over and over and over again. I mean, for months after that, she's, I'm just listening to this, poem again. And so it was fantastic. And we went from there over to my maternal grandmother's house, met her. I was loving that because I'm thinking, man, the wisdom here. And you think about timing. I'm so glad I did this now because you're getting older, but to be able to lay eyes on people that, they knew about me, they wondered about me, and now I'm sitting here in your living room. Here I am. I mean, it was the most powerful thing I've seen. And then the next day, it was the family reunion in the park. So now there's a bunch of people, and everybody knows, hey, they found Michael. So I'm going to the park. And there's a barbecue, and there's, we're at this pavilion, and everyone's there. And I was in awe that I made it back home. That's what I was thinking to myself. I made it back home because I'm looking around, and there's all these Black people, and everywhere I look, Black people everywhere. And one of the things that I remember the most is as a young kid, not really young kid, a lot of people comment on my eyes because I'm Black, but I have green eyes. So people will say, You're black with green eyes, right? Where does that come from? Well, you don't have the answers. The other thing about adoptees, we don't have the answers. Every time you go to the doctor and they ask you about your medical history, I don't have the answers to that either. So you just have to say, I'm adopted, right? I don't know that. So, but when I go to this park, I got my answer. Yeah, it runs in the family, right? One of my great aunts, she said, yeah, it runs in the family. So I saw a lot of green eyes and hazel eyes, Black people in this park. Just getting that answer alone and knowing this is where I came from, right? And what a great feeling. So I feel like it was, I know no other way to describe it, but at that moment you said, I made it back from 1972 when I was born at the hospital right here in Syracuse. This is my first time coming back home. And the thing about my reunion, I will say, and I know everyone doesn't have this experience, but I'll tell you right now, I remember one of the relatives getting up and he had the microphone in his hand and he said, Michael, this isn't welcome to the family. This is welcome back to the family, right? And everybody was just so welcoming that I don't have any stories about being pushed away. I don't have any of that. They were welcoming. It felt natural, from talking to cousins, to talking to aunts and uncles, to talking to my grandmother, to talking to my mom, my brothers. Everything just felt like, wow, who knew? And so it was exciting. And so to this day, that was 5 years ago. Almost, 5 years ago. We're in June now. This reunion was in July 5 years ago. So everything that I've learned since then just has me want to learn more and more and more. So I'm in regular contact with my birth mom, my dad. Through this process, I also found who he was. He passed away a while ago. And it was probably, I don't remember what it was, but it was well before I was going on this exercise to try to find them. And so I also reunited with his side of the family. So I learned through this process, I also have siblings on his side. So I've met one brother on his side that's a little bit younger than me. And then I have a sister, on his side too. So I've met all of them, aunts, uncles. My dad was one of, I think, 17 siblings. So the families on both sides are huge. So I'm not just talking about a few people. Like I got a whole tribe, right? And so it's just nice to be, to have answers to the questions. I always say this, I never wanted to die without knowing my roots. I told myself this over and over again, praying to God, do not let me die, right, before I know where I came from. And the other part of that was important about that reunion was that I feel like I needed my birth family to know that I was okay. That's the most important for me. That was so important. Is like, I want them to know that I became something and that I'm not upset about you making the decision to adopt me. That's never, ever entered my mind, that I'm mad you did this, right? Never entered my mind because I didn't know the history. I didn't know why. I mean, there are good reasons why people adopt. That's what I believe. Some people say that there should be no place for it, right? But I believe that there are good reasons to adopt. And here's the thing. I'm here talking to you today. So I'm still here. So people battle a lot of things in life, health issues, people lose both their parents or, in an accident, whatever it may be. There are all kinds of reasons why you may not be raised by the people that birthed you, right? There are all kinds of reasons. So now I'm older now, I can explain it more like that. And I understand more of the rationale behind the why. But at the same time, I'm not going to lie, it was still tough. But I just wanted them to know that the decision that you made, although tough, and I got a lot of stories about it, I just want you to know I made it. And I'm glad to be back here. But I now want you to know, who I am and what I've been through. And I am waiting for you to share with me what life was like. Right. And so as long as when I kept it like that, they didn't sense anger. They didn't sense any of that because I was never angry. Right. I was angry about the stuff I told you about at the start of the conversation as a kid, not having answers. But I'm certainly not going to be angry with my birth family for making that decision. And they didn't know where I was going. And one thing I forgot to tell you is you were talking about earlier that back in the 70s, right? And we kind of, we don't know what the resources were like, back then. There's more information now, all that. What I do know is that my adoptive parents, for most of the process, they thought they were getting a white kid, right? They found out that I was Black late in the game. And the reason why I point that out is because, well, you weren't prepared, right? There wasn't like homework done. You didn't, take classes and study what this is going to mean for you to bring a Black child into your basically all white space in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1973, right? So when you find out late, you think about why I'm here now, the work that you're doing, and you think about to educate people, to prepare them so that they have the tools so that it doesn't become so difficult to raise a child and that the child is not going to tell you everything. I'll tell you that right now. I tell parents this all the time. That child you're raising, just because they're quiet, doesn't mean they're good. I had my quiet moments too. Doesn't mean I'm good. It just means that, I just don't want to talk to anybody now. So that's the quiet. It doesn't mean like, well, we're not hearing any complaints from his teachers. Everything seems to be quiet. That is not a sign that everything's okay. So, it's just things like that come back to me that I just say to myself, we got to understand the resources weren't there. My parents didn't have the resources. I see myself as a resource now for adoptive parents. But if my parents would have had it, they're smart people. If they knew what they didn't know at the time, right, they would have acted accordingly, but they didn't know. So I'm on a mission now through this work to help parents, understand, some of the things that I went through, some of the things maybe that they're struggling with their own kids at this point, and just to be a resource for them. And I get a lot of great questions, right, from parents, people emailing and reaching out, or they'll see something I posted, online, and the questions are great. And for me, it's about having that willingness. If you have the willingness to actually want to learn, because you're going to go through things, right? If you're raising a Black child, one of the first things you got to figure out is their hair, right? Right. Their hair isn't your hair. So you got to figure out, how do we do that? And the reason why something like hair becomes so important, and it's who we are. Our hair is different. Okay. Right. And the hair care for Black people is different. You've got to understand that so that your kid is going off to wherever they're going and they're not going to be teased, because we know, hey, listen, if you show up to school and your hair isn't right, trust me, you're getting talked about. This is what you're going to get talked about. And even still as adults, we still make comments when people, you see their hair and you go, oh, wow. You're bold coming out here with your hair like that. So you can imagine with kids, when they're going to school, you've got to know how to do that. That's the visual. Okay. So when parents get that right, now I know how to do their hair, and that takes some skill. I mean, it's such a different way of doing hair that it really is like taking a course, and you got to study and you got to practice, to get it right. So when you figure that out, that's the first part. But then you got to understand there is a lifetime to go. You figured out the hair. That's something that you see. Where I come into play in trying to help parents is with all the things that you may not see with the visual, because there's a lot of things we tuck away here. And those are the things that become problematic, because at some point you may not see it when your kid's 5, you may not see it at 10, you might see it at 15 when you first start seeing signs, but it's been there, and those are things that I talk about when I talk to other transracial adoptees, the majority of us are on the same page in terms of that, is that when you adopt, there's that moment that you adopt. Papers are signed and you're taking your little bundle of joy home. And people begin to say, oh, what a great thing that you did. And it is. However, that's just the beginning. That's not the end. That's the beginning. That moment where you feel good and you finally got a little child and you're taking them home and they're yours now, that's the beginning. But I'm 54 years old and I'm still healing from my experience. I'm not a finished product. I am still, to this day, I'm going through therapy being on this podcast right now, because every time I tell my story and I say it out loud to somebody, I just met you today, right? So when I say it out loud, it still helps me understand what I was going through, why I went through that, and how I came full circle and got back to this point where now I know my roots. That's powerful.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
Michael, when you were talking about the hair care, a few episodes ago, I interviewed Jerry Tucker. He and his wife had adopted, I believe it was 4 teenagers from Uganda. So white parents adopting Black teenagers. And Jerry talked about how he took his daughter, went to a hair care class with his daughter. So he, together they could learn, and he could learn about hair care because it's that important. So, I think sometimes now there's a little bit more awareness of that now than there was back then, but still parents have to be very intentional and deliberate in learning these things.
Oh, yeah.
And I love, so you started Beyond the Moment Adoption Studio. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the name itself, Beyond the Moment, actually goes back to the story that I was just telling you, because there is the moment that you adopt. And that's just the beginning. So the work that I do is focused beyond that moment, right? Now that you're raising and that child is in your home, here are some things to be mindful of as you go throughout that journey. We just talked about one of them. Get the hair right. Do not send them out there looking crazy. And there are all of these hair groups on Facebook, black hair, how to do black hair. And there are thousands and tens of thousands of people in these groups because they're all having conversations on how to do the hair. And there are a lot of white parents raising Black kids, in those groups. And so I spend some time there and I'm reading the comments. Good. That's one thing that you need to get right. But there are other things that when you talk about what conversations you need to be having with your kids. A couple things that jump out at me. You have to have the race conversations. Okay? You got to have the conversations with your kids where your kids know that you love their beautiful Black skin. You, as the parent, that you love, because no one else in my environment is telling me that. I go to school and all those white spaces, nobody saying, "Oh, your skin is beautiful. I like it." Right? No one tells you that. So where are you getting your beauty from? I don't see any beauty at all, because when I look in the mirror, now the image I see in the mirror is one where I hear all the teasing from school, right? So you get up every day, you're going to be in the mirror at some point. And so for me, I had the experiences where I'm crying in the mirror. I don't want to look like this no more. I want to be like them. I wish I was white. I've had that. I can't even believe I'm saying that today, knowing who I am. But back then, I was really looking to be white. I got to tell you this, the Sally's hair salon story. I wanted my hair to be straightened because it hurt so bad in terms of when you're trying to pick it out and it was nappy and no products in it. I remember telling my adoptive mom, when you go and you take me to Sally's, I want you to have her straighten the hair. And there used to be back in this was like in junior high. So back then, the white kids used to have that haircut. It was more like a flop, they called it. And it flopped down in their hair, and they were always, blowing it out of their face. And it was just a flop, but it was short everywhere else, but you had that flop. I said, yeah, I want that. Get a flop. And then I can and I can't believe, but that was my mindset. And so you get things like the hair right, the conversations that you need to have. And again, let them know you feel really good about who they are, right? And that you even know that, hey, I know it must be challenging, must be difficult, right? To go into many places and you're one of a few, right? But if you were to ask me, maybe not in first grade, but if you were to ask me in, I don't know, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and I actually opened up and got to tell you kind of what was going on, I think I would have been truthful about the difficulties of it. But nobody really asked me about the difficulties of it until it was too late and there was an explosion. And now I have to, so I'm always reporting after the fact. What I want parents to do is, man, get out in front of it. Okay. And then it's not reporting after the fact. You've got some background knowledge about what they're going through. And what we want parents to do is to be our protectors. If you're sending me out here, I need some protection somewhere. Where's that protection going to come from? And that's what we're looking for. And so because I didn't feel I had protection, that also made me run away. It's when we talk about fight or flight, I was always in flight mode. To this day, the anxiety that I carry around every day is a process for me. Every day is still a process, right? About how I get my mind right, the meditation, right? The breathing techniques, all the things that I do just to, calm myself at various times. And and again, there are things that can trigger those past experiences. And even though I know people say, there are some people that will take the stance that, hey, you should be over that by now, right? You're good. You've had a good life. And it's just not the way it works. And so for me, I got into this work to help parents understand that this is, yes, it's lifelong what you're doing. Okay. And if you want to trigger an example, is my adoptive mom passed away maybe 3 years ago. We're in 26, maybe 22, maybe 4 years, 3.5 years ago. Well, when she passed away, I came back to the funeral. I'm based in Florida. I go back to Lincoln for the funeral. My adoptive brother, who's older, was there. My sister was there, who's the biological child, and my dad. I didn't plan the funeral. I live in Florida. I show up to the funeral, and it's things like this. You go back, but my sister, who's the biological child, and her family were sitting in the front row, and next to my dad. I was in the second row with my family. My brother is adopted. He was in the second row. I'm going to be honest. I don't remember the funeral because in my mind, I was thinking, why am I sitting back here? Like, that's my dad. He just lost his wife. I just lost my mom. We should be sitting next to each other, right? I should be supporting my dad. But the whole funeral, I'm sitting and I'm steaming inside, right? And I should be grieving the loss of my mom, but the whole funeral was a blur because all I'm thinking about is it's a trigger. Because why am I getting pushed back?
Right.
First of all, I'm older than my biological sister, right? And you're there. She lives in Lincoln, right? So she's got a great heart. You know what I mean? This isn't even on her. but I'm also going to be, I cannot tell my story without giving people a look into the truth. Okay. And so, they, I think, have learned along the way, even me as an adult. I think my adoptive family is somewhat surprised when they hear some of these stories, right, today, because they'll say, I had no idea.
Right.
I just didn't know. And the reason why they didn't know, many adoptees, we get really good at hiding things.
Yeah.
We hide what we feel for fear that you're not going to understand. And if you don't understand or you dismiss what I'm bringing to you with my pain, I'm forever damaged, because that also is you basically saying to me, hey, get over it. That's just life and what kids do. And I'm thinking, this is so far from, that's not helpful to me. So there's just things that you want to say, but I tell you that story to say that I ended up sharing that story with my sister recently. She had no idea, and I love my adopted sister. But I also know that my adoptive family doesn't really have a great understanding of what it was like. And so they're learning along with everybody else who sees this podcast and the other ones I'm on. They would be learning at the same time that everybody else is learning about the experience. But I wanted to do this in a way where, as I said, I don't want kids going through my situation right now. I don't want them to have to walk the same road and have the same sort of challenge. Every journey is different. But if I can help parents out there right now and help them see some things that they wouldn't have been aware of without the resources, I'm all into this and I love it.
And you have a great resource on your website, because I know I went there and downloaded it. And so you recommend 7 conversations every white parent must have with their Black child. And so these are great conversation starters, and so I know our listeners can go there. We will put a link in the show notes to your website so that they can get this downloadable document that you have. But so what are some of these questions? I know some of them are adoption related. Why did birth parents choose adoption? Why did my birth parents place me for adoption? Some of those conversations, because sometimes I think it can be easy to, or adoptive parents may think it's easier to avoid the conversations, brush things under the rug, assume it's not a thing, right? And think love is enough, and now we're just going to move on and live happily ever after. And you can't brush these things under the rug. So share with us some of those vital questions parents need to address.
So, the questions that you need to, and there's so many of them, but I'm actually, because you were bringing that up, but when you said why, so one of those questions, why was I adopted? Right. I think that's a conversation you must have with your kids.
Yeah.
I never really knew the answer to that question. I knew something stuck with me that my mom said my birth mom was young. Well, when I found out what was going on, she was 23. Okay. You're able to have a kid at 23. Wasn't that young, but that's the one thing that I had, was that she said that my birth mother was young, but I didn't have any other information. And the one pager that I got that my parents would have received before they picked me up, right? It described my mom, my birth mom. It described my dad. It described me, right? I think it was even something there about the doctor. You know what I mean? And so there was something about, I went to foster care from the time I was born for the 18 months. But so there was information there. Even that, you had that. I know you had that, right? And so I'm just now seeing it and learning it when I'm a grown adult. So I think the conversation itself about how the kid got there in the first place, that's not something, how the kid got there. But at some point, that child wants to know, how did this all go down? Right? I mean, I knew my parents came to get me in Syracuse. My adoptive dad likes to tell one story from that time that they took me out to eat early on when they picked me up from Syracuse. I don't know if this was on the way home when they first got back to Nebraska. And, he likes to tell the story about how, I guess there was a bowl of sour cream and I must have thought it was ice cream. And I dug a spoon in there and I ate the sour cream. And, I just look up my face. That's the one story I've heard. That's all I know. And I knew my mom was young. But outside of that, I don't know much else. So for me, having the conversations with your child about how they got to this place, if you think about even just any family, whether you were adopted or not, in this day and age, you can probably go and watch yourself when you were born. Someone was taking videos, all these sort of things. I would have loved to have had that. That wasn't available at the time. But since it wasn't available, conversation is one thing that's always been available. The truth has always been available. And that's what we would be looking for. So that's one of the things is talking to your kids about the situation. Another one that comes up that's in the guide is something along the lines of you're talking to your kid about what's going on in school. Like, how do you handle that situation and being different? Because if someone asks me that question, well, how do you handle being different at school? You're one of a few, or maybe just a couple Black kids. That's a conversation starter, right? You might learn something from my answer. And even if I don't have an answer right then, don't let that be the last time you ask the question. Just let me sit with it. When I'm ready, maybe I'll come back to it. So so in that free guide, there are a number of these conversation starters that for me, you say, listen, I want you to take a comprehensive approach, right, to parenting these kids, because it's a different situation, right? And there are all kinds of situations. You may have a child that has some health issues, right? You're not going to be parenting the exact same way as your neighbor that's parenting a child that appears to look fine and no health issues whatsoever. They've got other things that they're going to worry about at some point. But for being in a transracial family, that has to be powerful and consistent conversations around how that child's feeling, ensuring that they're comfortable in their environment, ensuring that we're consistent in the way that we're asking the questions to get that child to talk. I had a lot in here my parents never knew about. It was there. I felt it. There came a point where I knew what it was, right? Like, I just don't feel comfortable in all this. And I knew in high school, I'm leaving Nebraska. And a lot of kids don't know this at that time, right? They don't know how it's all going to shake out. I knew at my first opportunity, I will not live in Lincoln, Nebraska, because of the pain. I never want to, and to this day, I got my dad's back there and my sister back there. I have a hard time going home. I have a hard time going back. They always telling me, we need to see y'all, you need to come back. But what they're not understanding is that's a trigger for me. It really is, because if I go back to Lincoln today, I still feel the stairs. It all comes roaring back. And so that becomes part of the thing. So having those conversations and making sure that your child's comfortable in the environment. And if they're not comfortable in that environment, what are we going to do about it? You will see in a lot of the resources and the things that I'm working on and I'm providing. I'm also writing a book. I Was Your Black Child is going to be the name of the book. That's also going to provide insight, for parents, just kind of, for me, it's about lived experience. There's the clinical side of adoption and all of that. And you can talk about adoption theory and all these things, and you can read a lot and sound like you're an expert. And then there's the folks that have lived it. So I've been giving myself an education for 54 years. And there's a lot to this. And I'm just, like I said, I am enjoying being back in this world. I was an educator for 30 years. So teacher, principal, district administrator, executive coach. Shifting over here, I'm still educating, but it's a different kind of education because I got personal experience, lived experience of being here. So that free guide that you're mentioning, that's going to, if parents sign up for the free guide, that'll put them on track to receive deeper information from me in the coming days and months and all that. There are different products that I sell in my digital product store as well. And so it just kind of depends on what the parent is trying to solve. I also do one-on-one coaching for parents as well. And so you may have parents that are just, they're struggling to figure it out. They could be struggling, or they just care enough. They want to talk this through. Right? Let me talk to somebody who's lived it to see what I can pick up on. And so I do that also on a lot of podcasts, right? My goal is to continue doing parent groups, as well, so that parents understand, listen, there are resources out here, and, we're one email, one phone call away. There's no reason you should have to sit there and struggle when you've got people that have lived this their entire life. And so, that's what I'm trying to do with Beyond the Moment Adoption Studio. And I will tell you, this is some of the funnest work I've ever been a part of. I've been a part of a lot of work, a lot of projects, but this one here stands at the top.
Yeah, I love that. So your website is beyondthemomentadoptionstudio.com.
Yes, beyondthemomentadoptionstudio.com.
And we will put a link in the show notes so our listeners can go there. I highly recommend putting in your email address and getting that downloadable guide of the 7 questions to ask, those conversation starters. And you've got lots of tools there to help. So love that, Michael. So as you know, as we, sort of wrap this up here now, there's so much to learn. But if you could just offer a word of advice, our listeners, again, are foster and adoptive parents. Many are probably white parents raising Black children. Give us a word of encouragement or advice that you'd want to leave us with today.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say, do your homework. Do your homework. Your kids need you. It's too hard to go this journey alone. And I can speak to it, but doing your homework, we're out here. We're out here to be of help. We're out here to ensure that you have the resources that you need to raise your child in a way where they understand their own identity. They have a sense of belonging, and you're really the key to facilitating that. And it's and I can't say it any other way. We all need parents. We need guides. Just because I'm Black and my parents are white doesn't give them any less responsibility. It actually gives them more responsibility, because I need you to understand my side of this and what I'm going through. And sometimes and for your kids, sometimes it looks different for you, because you're thinking, hey, I'm doing a great thing, I'm raising my child. But what we want you to do is to do your homework, research. And if you're on this podcast right now, or you're downloading the free guide, I already know immediately you're one that can get this done, because you're gathering information and you want it. And so Beyond the Moment Adoption Studio, we're here for you. You can download the free guide. Like I said, there's paid resources on there as well. And so just look out for those things. And there's more to come. If you sign up for the guide, obviously you're going to get continued resources. They're going to be coming to your email, once a week or so. That's just got resources that's going to help you out.
Well, Michael, thank you so much again for sharing your inspiring story with us, and especially for teaching us how to be better and more intentional and informed parents. Thank you so much for all you're doing and for being on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And as always, thank you for listening to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey today. I hope you were informed and encouraged by my conversation with Michael Gaither. Please be sure to visit his website, beyondthemomentadoptionstudio.com. Access his important resources. There's that free download with those 7 conversation starters that will better equip you. And I highly recommend that for all white parents who are raising Black children. Michael's resources are going to be a huge help to you on your parenting journey. And in addition to inspiring and encouraging you through this podcast, I also have resources, especially if you are raising children who are prenatally exposed to substances, whether it be drugs, alcohol, especially trauma, right? You heard about our online support community, our Hope for the FASD Journey group. Highly recommend you getting involved there. I have online and in-person workshops and one-on-one parent coaching. All of our resources are at our website, justicefororphansny.org. Just go there and click on the adoption and foster care journey, and you'll see all of those resources. Links in the show notes there as well. If you would like to watch this podcast, you can check it out on YouTube at the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel. And then whatever podcast platform you listen to your podcasts on, follow it, subscribe to it. Leave a review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. It makes it easier for other parents on this journey to find our resources and to find this podcast. So, and also please like and follow our social media. Would love to connect with you there as well. As always, I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.